Welcome to Death Stories Living Truth. I am Janae of Living Truth, a death educator and a storyteller, creating a space where we can finally talk honestly about death, grief, spirituality, and what it truly means to live. On this channel, we explore near-death experiences, real death stories, emotional healing, spiritual perspectives, and the lessons people discover when life changes forever. This is not just a channel, it's a conversation most of the world avoids. And I am so glad you're here, soul travelers.
With you. So I grew up in a really chaotic, dysfunctional family.
Hi,
full of
I'm Betty Guadagno.
And
I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
And addiction.
And I'm here to share the story of my life with you. So I grew up in a really chaotic, dysfunctional family full of poverty and sexual trauma and addiction. And it's been that way for generations and generations. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And my parents were kind of these traumatized people who were holding on to each other like life rafts, hoping that they could help keep each other afloat, but they were really more like anchors for each other. And all throughout my childhood, I just watched their addiction continue to progress. I didn't know what was going on as a little kid. I thought that my life was really normal. I thought that it was normal to steal your groceries. I thought that it was normal to steal your clothes. I thought that it was normal to move every couple months, like when a piece of paper was taped to your door. I didn't realize it then, but those were eviction notices. And every time that there was one on the door, we would start packing all of our stuff and we would move, and that would happen once or twice a year. We always had a long orange extension cord going from our apartment to the neighbor's apartment so that we could have electricity in our house. And I just thought that that was all really normal. My friends' parents were going away on weekend business trips, and my dad was going away on weekend trips to jail.
It's a much different experience.
When I started to get around other kids, I realized my house is very different. You know, my friends' houses smell like cookies and love, and my house smells like cigarettes and cat piss. It's a much different experience. But my parents were loving people, despite the fact that they were drug addicts and didn't know how to take care of us properly. And in the height of the Oxycontin epidemic, my parents were prescribed over 1,000 pills each every month, and somehow we're always still running out of pills. They would sell half the pills to make money, to pay the bills, and then they would eat the other half of the pills. But every month, it was like the agony of withdrawal, the agony of the lights being turned off, the gas being turned off, about to be evicted again. And so in October of 2007, my parents made this decision that they had to stop using drugs. They had to end the suffering that they were going through. And they didn't know how to do that. The only thing that they knew how to do was to do what everybody else in our family does, and to stop using drugs, and that's die. So in 2007, my parents committed suicide with one another. They intentionally overdosed. They took 1,000 pills between the two of them, and they ate the bars of Xanax, and they left the Vicodin for me to sell because they knew that I could make money off of those pills. So it was like this really twisted inheritance. And they left $300 in an envelope. That was all the money that they had in the world. They left these notes. They were very short. My mom's note was written on the kitchen magnet notepad, and it just said, "Take care of each other." At the time, my sister and I was 23, my sister was 18. We definitely didn't know how to take care of each other. And my father's note was addressed just to my sister. So if it wasn't clear that my dad didn't like me, it was definitely clear in that moment that I was not the favorite. My sister and I found our parents. We went to the house, and there was this smoke alarms were going off. Just like an eerie feeling going up to the house, because they weren't answering their cell phones, and it was very strange that they weren't answering us. And when we pulled up to the house, the smoke alarms were going off. And so in my head, right away, I'm like, oh, they nodded out. There's something on the stove. There's a fire. Run to the door. Rush inside. Nothing on the stove, right? The gas is turned off. Of course, there can't be anything on the stove. When I ran to the stove, my sister ran upstairs to their bedroom, and then that's when I heard this blood-curdling scream. And now I know that it's the scream of death. If you've ever witnessed somebody
both
if you've ever seen a dead body, like you've heard that scream before.
I wasn't entirely sure if they were dead, but they were purple.
And I ran upstairs and she was rushing down the stairs as I was running up the stairs. And when I walked into my parents' room, I saw both of their dead bodies. And I wasn't entirely sure if they were dead, but they were purple and the smoke alarms were blaring. So like they must be unconscious. And I called the police and they told me to like drag their bodies out of the room. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
There was two voices in my head after that experience. I was already a drug addict before all this happened. I started using meth when I was 15 and like I fell in love. And so I had always been substituting drugs and boys and codependency and like all these different addictions. But when my parents died, I had one voice in my head that said, you need to stop using drugs. They just killed your parents. And then I had another voice in my head and it said, you have to keep using drugs. This is all that you have left of them. What kind of daughter would you be if you let go of the legacy of your family? Despite how fucked up that legacy is, this is your legacy to carry out. You have to use because they can't. So from here on out, you're using for yourself and you're using for them. And that, I made it my job. I made it my job to just be as medicated and sedated and fucked up as I could possibly be. I abandoned my sister. I moved across the country. I said that I couldn't deal. And I was a tornado of destruction. Every person that I encountered, I wanted to make everybody as miserable as I was. So I was a traumatized person who maliciously, intentionally traumatized other people. Every partner, every friend that I ever came across, I would get them strung out on drugs. And it was just this whole world of chaos and addiction and poverty and everything that goes along with that. In this process of like being this tornado of an addict and just really wanting to be the perpetrator in people's lives instead of the victim to the universe. I started dating a guy, and again, if you want to date me, you got to use drugs. That's what I do. That's what love equals in my head, because that's what I saw modeled to me. I saw toxic codependency and drug addiction equals love, and so I was carrying that out. And this guy told me that he was sick. He needed a kidney. 35 years old, by all other means, like perfectly healthy person, cool guy, musician, super kind, really fun to be around. And so in my head, I was like, oh my God, this guy might die. We got to be living our best lives together. Who knows how much time he has left? And in my head, using drugs meant living your best life. And even though he was sick, and I don't know how long he would have lived, he ended up dying of a cocaine overdose. His heart exploded. And the guilt from that loss just sent me into such a shame spiral. I went to his funeral totally loaded, high on heroin. I brought another guy as a date to my dead boyfriend's funeral, like just the insanity. When I went home, I made a deal with myself that I was going to do this insane amount of drugs. And if I didn't die, I would go get help. And to my surprise, I woke up. And I kept the promise to myself. And I checked myself into a detox. And this was the first time that I was really giving myself a shot at recovery. Like I had been in a dozen detoxes and rehabs before, but I never went with the intention of getting clean and staying clean. I would just go so that I could rest and recalibrate so that the drugs would work again. And this time I listened. I really wanted to learn, like, what is addiction? Why am I dealing with this? How do I get better from this? And a 12-step fellowship came in, and this woman came and she shared her story, and she was so beautiful. It looked like she was sparkling. And I was like, oh, am I like really high? Why does this lady look like she's on fire? And this is crazy. But there was just something about her. She was so alive. She was so full of life. And she was sharing that she hadn't used drugs in over 25 years, that she had been through death, divorce, disease, challenges with children, and through all of it, she didn't use. And I was like, well, this lady is a fucking liar. Nobody can do that. That's crazy. But there was something about her, and so I asked her where she was going to be the day that I was getting out of the detox, and I followed her to a meeting. And I stuck around for like a month, but I wasn't taking it seriously. I was still using drugs, but I thought that because I was using a lesser amount of drugs that I was clean, like I was doing so great. I was like, well, it's just one pill a day. It's not 30 pills. It's not heroin. Like I'm cleaner than I was. That counts, doesn't it? It does not count, by the way. And
I love her justification. I'm cleaner. It is better, but she's right. If she's not being honest with herself, like it's not going to change anything. You're either clean or you're not.
I picked up a 30-day key tag that I didn't actually deserve because I wasn't clean the whole time. And I went out to celebrate. And when I went out to celebrate, some guy offered me meth. He asked me if I wanted to smoke meth in the bathroom with him. And I hadn't touched meth in 14 years at that point in time. Even though it was my first love and my first drug of choice, I had gone over a decade
That's
without
crazy.
it.
Who
And
goes
as soon as he
out
asked
to
me
eat
that, I was
and
like,
gets offered to use meth in the
yes, this is
bathroom?
what I wanna do.
I don't think that happens
that's
to
what-
just anybody.
Meth at the end of my active addiction obliterated me. I became a shell of a person. I lost 100 pounds in 3 months. I lost most of my teeth. These are paid for. I started picking myself, and I thought that bugs lived inside me all the time. I would put off bug bombs in my house, and I would stay in the house while it was being fumigated because I thought that it would make like heroin, meth, ketamine, acid, shrooms, like just give me anything that can make me not feel my feelings. That's what I really need at this point in my life. And in March of 2019, I experienced a drug overdose. I did too much, surprise, doing all those drugs. I can't believe I did too much. And I had this very spiritually transformative experience in my overdose. I had a near-death experience. And I had overdosed before, and I had never had any kind of spiritual experience, just lights out, waking up in a hospital bed, having no idea how I got there. But this time something different happened. So the first part of my experience was a life review. And in active addiction, I was a tormentor. I was a ruthless abuser. So, I had been prostituting myself for about 10 years at this point in time. And for the last couple years of active addiction, I wouldn't just prostitute myself. I would manipulate other women, and I would get them strung out on drugs, and I would prostitute them as well. So in my life review, it was just them. It was like the experiences that I was having with them, like watching them be abused, watching them be raped, watching them just hate their lives and like feeling forced to do this. I didn't realize that was what the experience was when it was happening. But in this life review, I was feeling everything from their perspective and my perspective. So I felt myself as like this control freak, this wannabe pimp. And then I felt it from their perspective as just like they were completely helpless and powerless over me. And so that sucked. And then the next part of my life review, I saw my boyfriend's death. I saw it from my perspective, his perspective, and his parents' perspective. And that was a kind of pain that I didn't know existed, the pain that his parents experienced with that loss. And then I experienced my parents' suicide from their perspective and from my perspective as a grieving daughter. So I felt their feelings before they made this decision. It was like I was warped into the scene of their suicide. I watched them writing their notes. I watched them driving to the pharmacy to pick up their prescriptions, things that I wasn't actually there seeing. But in this life review, I could see this whole scene playing out. And just like the absolute ocean of anguish that they were drowning in, that they actually thought that this was the best thing that they could do for themselves and their family. So at this point in my life, I'm a militant atheist. I've gone through a lot of garbage in my life, a lot of bullshit. And so I didn't believe in God or anything bigger, because what kind of God would allow all those terrible things to happen to me? So I thought, nothing happens when you die. I thought it's blackness, you turn into dirt, the end. But in this experience, I thought, I must be dead, because I'm seeing a bunch of dead people, and I thought that nothing happens, but it's way fucking worse than that. This is hell. Like, I am trapped inside of hell right now. That's really what it felt like. And then as soon as I kind of surrendered to this idea that I'm dead, I started to hear my father's voice. And at this point in time, my dad had been dead by suicide for 11 years. And he was chanting, "You are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe." And he just kept saying it over and over and over again. And I didn't believe him, because I had just witnessed this horrific life that I had led. And so I didn't feel worthy of any kind of love, let alone universal love. But I trusted his voice. And so I followed him. Voice, I landed in the light. And it wasn't like, it was like kind of like a beam me up Scotty sort of Star Trek experience. It was like I had been beamed into a whole nother dimension. And in that space, it felt totally different than what I had just been experiencing. In the light, it felt like warm joy, bliss, ecstasy, reunion. A lot of near-death experiencers have a hard time describing what heaven feels like. But I want you to imagine every one of the trillion of cells on your body having a trillion orgasms each. That is what heaven feels like. It is lit. It feels so good. So while I'm in the light of this experience, a bunch of scenes start to form around me. The first scene, it kind of looks like I'm on the deck of a spaceship. That's the way that the imagery came through. And there's this column of light in the center, and it's like this commanding presence. And there's thousands of other souls all around me. And the commander is telling us that we are divine spiritual soldiers and that we're going to Earth on a mission to uplift the consciousness of the planet. And they kept chanting that it was called the Great Awakening, and this is what we've all signed up for, and that we're so brave and we're so bold, and thank you so much for your service and your mission. And I'm just accepting everything as truth. You know, on Earth, like we question everything that comes up. Not in this space. I was like, okay, they're telling me that I'm a spiritual soldier and that I'm here for the Great Awakening. I'm on board. This is what I'm here for. So my awareness shifts over to another scene, and I find myself in front of a table of beings, these 4 tall light beings, and they're in front of like this really crappy plastic folding table, nothing ornate, nothing beautiful, nothing that you would expect to see in heaven. And on top of it, there is this beautiful ornate book. It's gold and red velvet, and it's huge, and they're opening it and they're thumbing through it. And they're telling me that it's good to see me. I'm not meant to stay. I'm only there for information. And I'm like looking all around me. I'm like, you guys aren't talking to me, are you? Because I don't know where I am, but I am definitely fucking staying here. This place is amazing. Where I just was, not amazing. This place, yes, I like it here. And they just kept affirming, no, you're only here for information. And they shift me over to another scene. And I find myself in what looks a lot like a video game. And that could be because of the generation that I'm born in, that it came through this way, or because we're living in a simulation, or some combination of both of those things. But it looked like I was in a spiritual supermarket, and I had this big empty grocery cart, and lining the walls of the grocery store aisles were these gigantic cereal boxes. And every cereal box had a life experience on it. I'm a liar. And I'm like this little hungry orb of light getting ready to come to Earth for the Great Awakening. And so I'm grabbing everything that I can get my hands on. I'm like, yes, I can't wait. Transformation of consciousness. Let's go. And I'm grabbing the most dense experiences like addiction, prostitution, poverty, homelessness. And with every box that I grab, there's a dual experience with it. So I don't just grab the box that says addiction. I also grab a box that says recovery. I don't just grab the box that says poverty. I also grab a box that says financial abundance. And so it's like everything has this dual experience. Everything that's going into the cart. There's like a variety pack of sexual trauma. I'm like, oh, I'll take that one. 20 boxes? That sounds good. So when I grab this box, there's a box that says childhood sexual trauma. And as I grabbed it, a little orb of light came out with the box. And that orb of light was the soul of the man who molested me when I was a little kid. And we came orb to orb with each other, and we came into a contract. And in that space, I could feel that we loved each other so much. And that's why we were going to play these roles for each other on Earth, the victim and the abuser. I mean, my human mind cannot comprehend how something like that makes any sense in a state of unconditional love. Like, why would you be somebody's predator if you actually love them? And I don't have some great, carefully constructed answer to explain why. I just know. I know that it's something that I planned. And that it was for the evolvement of myself. It was to finish a karmic loop. I saw that in a previous lifetime, I had been his abuser in the same way. And so in this moment of being downloaded with this whole scene and all this information, I realized that I'm not a victim to my circumstance. I am actually a divine co-creator of my experience. Nothing has happened to me. It's all happened for me for some divine reason. Again, way above my pay grade. I don't know what the reason is. But I'm so grateful for this information in this space. I feel like 2 tons of garbage has been unshackled from me. I feel so free and so light. And I find myself back in front of the table of beings, and I'm throwing myself on the ground in gratitude. Oh my God, thank you so much for showing me this. This is exactly the information that I've needed my whole life. I finally feel like I understand what Earth is about. I'm still not going to go back there though, because that place is really a dumpster fire and it's not doing great. But I thank you guys so much for this information. I'm going to like watch this Great Awakening show from up here. I'll grab my PJs and a bowl of popcorn, and like, it's going to be lit. I'm really excited about it. And they were like, listen, you have to go back. And I kind of transformed into a small child. And I'm like kicking my hands and my feet on the ground. You cannot make me go back. I will not go back. You don't tell us what Earth is actually like. You haven't set me up for any kind of success. I will not go back there. And they were kind of like lightheartedly chuckling. And they said, you say this every time you come back here. You're always telling us that we don't prepare you for what Earth is like, but we do. You just forget. That's part of the game. And, I said, and I could see my body now outside of myself on my bathroom floor, naked, blasted out, a mess. And they told me that I had to go back into her. And I said, I'll do anything. I cannot go back into her, meaning this body right here. And they said, well, if you don't go back into her, then you're going to be reborn.
I think that,
and we'll show you the baby that you're going to be reborn into. And again, like a video game, and a little 3D avatar of a baby came up on a screen. All her stats popped up next to her. And then my life experience grocery cart went into her scene. And so she was going to take on my cart, and then she was going to have extra cereal boxes of life experience. And I just thought, like, oh my God, if I have to start from zero or just go back into this glitched, broken body that I just came from, I guess I'll just go back into her. And so as soon as I made that decision, my awareness started sifting back into my body. Mission. You're going to have soulmates and kindred spirits. You're going to have community and mentors and teachers. It's going to be so much better. Just trust us. And I was like, I do not fucking trust you guys. I don't even know you, bro. And I found my awareness back in my body, and I woke up on my bathroom floor, and I just kind of sat up and I shook my head, and I was like, whoa, I was so high that I thought I was talking to God. I was so high that I thought I planned my crazy fucked up life. That's nuts. And I just went back to living my life exactly as I had always been living it. Prostituting myself, getting drugs, using drugs, manipulating people, stealing, all the things that's what I did with my life. I went right back into it. And then the universe started to get very small and putting me on another path without my permission. So one day I need to pick up, and my spirit, I call it my
yes,
healer,
that is absolutely her addiction, her fear, her lack of self-esteem, the way she feels about herself, telling her that she can't ask for help.
And I call
when really asking for help is the one thing.
And he says, listen, I'm out of the game. I found Jesus. I want to be a good father. Don't ever fucking call me again. Click, blocks me. I'm like, okay, that's weird. No big deal, though. I have other dealers that I can call. Call up the next guy on the list. Same exact story. Except these guys didn't know each other. This man also found Jesus and wanted to be a good person. And I was like, where has Jesus been hiding? How are all these drug dealers finding Jesus? This is so weird. Okay. It doesn't work. It starts raining. It gets wet. There's a hole in my pocket. I go home empty-handed. Like everything that could put me in a space to not successfully use was happening. And so then I was going through heroin withdrawal, and I'm on day 3, which is like the absolute worst day. It's the day when like you're shitting all over yourself, you're puking, your skin feels like it's on fire, your blood is made of lava, you're like praying for the pain to stop. And I just had this moment of total defeat, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to kill myself There's no way that I'm going to get through this. I can't get drugs. I can't get drugs at work. And there's no way that I can go through this pain. This is the end. And then I realized, like, I'm so sick right now that I can't even get up and figure out a way to kill myself. I can't even get out of bed to like go grab a knife from the kitchen or like eat 100 Tylenol. Like there was nothing that I could do. That's how like absolutely destroyed I was. And in that moment, I heard a voice in my head and it told me that I could request what I wanted fixed. And I was like in the throes of desperation. So I was like, okay, strange voice, I want this pain to be gone. And they told me to lay back and to count backwards from 10. And as I did, these two little men appeared in my mind's eye. They were wearing these white lab coats and they had these bulbous noses. Every time I tell the story, I could see them. They're like, hi, we're still here. So these two little men, white lab coats, bulbous noses, and all of a sudden these little lawnmowers manifested in front of them. And then they took off in separate directions, literally all throughout my mind. It was just like, and as they did, I felt these intense hot tingles going through every place that they were walking through, every crevice of my mind.
Because
and when
so
they were done,
I
felt this intense,
is not
like it felt like a plunger on the crown of my head. And as it plunged down and came back up, I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal. There was this bright white flash, and I couldn't believe it. Like one moment before I was sick all over myself, welcoming death, and then the next moment I was completely well and healed and fine. And I throw myself on the ground and I'm like crying out to a God that I do not believe in. And I'm like, how could this be happening to me? I don't believe in this. I don't believe in you. Like you could not have picked. Worthy of this. I'm not worthy of this. And then I hear them chanting back to me, but you're worthy of all the love in the universe. You're worthy of all the love in the universe. And so after this experience, I thought that I was Jesus, because who wouldn't, right? I was like, I could heal. I've been healed. I can heal. And so I'm like running around the streets of New York City. I'm laying hands on homeless drug addicts. I'm like, don't worry, I've got this. Like, we're all going to be okay. I was like one of those crazy people on the train who would like proselytize, even though I didn't know what I was proselytizing about, because I didn't know who God was or anything. And I was just like screaming, don't use drugs. McDonald's is poison. Don't eat McDonald's. It was total. It was unhinged. It was so insane. That lasted for a couple of weeks.
That's why we watch these stories.
In that time, I like went into an RV dealership because I had this very strong intuitive nudge that I was supposed to travel across the country in an RV preaching the word of higher consciousness.
Underbelly,
and
I will leave it in the descriptions. And until next time. This story is really interesting. Like, this lady has such an incredible life experience already, even before she had a near-death experience.
And they shift me over to another scene, and I find myself in what looks a lot like a video game. And that could be because of the generation that I'm born in, that it came through this way, or because we're living in a simulation, or some combination of both of those things. But it looked like I was in a spiritual supermarket, and I had this big empty grocery cart.
9 million people there. And the train gets to a stop. A man steps inside and he sits directly across from me, even though the whole train car was empty. And around his neck was this big blinged out emblem for a 12-step fellowship. And I heard a voice in my head and it said, that's your path. Follow him to a meeting. And so I asked this stranger on the train if he happened to be going to a meeting and if he would take me with him. And he told me that he was on his way and that I could come. And that was my day 1 in recovery. And, you know, they told me that I had to keep making meetings every day, that I use drugs every day, so now I got to make meetings every day. So the next day I go to a women's meeting. And, you know, at this point, like I said, like I'm destroyed, right? Like I'm dirty. I have no teeth. My whole face is full of pussy wounds from picking myself over and over and over again. So like when I walk into the room, it's painfully obvious that I'm new. I haven't, you know, I have no recovery in my life yet. And this woman came up to me as soon as I walked in, and she held me so tight. And I hadn't been touched in a loving way in a really long time. And so it kind of made me recoil. Like I didn't understand why she was embracing me like this. And then she whispered in my ear and she said, "You are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe." And I collapsed. I melted into this woman. I rested my head on her big boobies for as long as she would let me. I let out this deep, guttural cry, and I surrendered. That was my deepest moment of surrender. I couldn't believe that I had been hearing these words of worthiness all throughout these experiences that I thought were psychosis. And they were just made up voices in my head. But now an actual physical person was saying the same words to me. And there was no way that I could deny that there was something bigger going on, that I didn't have access to the plan. And so I kept making meetings. And the next day I went to another meeting. And I had this thought while I was in the meeting. It was a huge meeting. There was like 80, 90 people in there. And it really felt like every person was sharing directly to me, even though they weren't. They didn't even know that I was there, that I existed. But it really did feel like every message was just for my ears. And I had this moment where I thought, damn, I don't know how to be a fucking person. How the hell am I going to do this? I don't even know how to wake up and brush my one good tooth without being high first. How the hell am I supposed to create a whole new life for myself? This is impossible. There's no way to do this. And right then, I realized that there was a woman in the meeting who was the director of a long-term women's facility that I had been in before. And I left because they wouldn't let me draw my eyebrows on for 30 days. I was like, I'm out of here. I'm not staying here. But I knew that maybe she could help me, right? Like that's her whole job. Her whole purpose in life is to help women find recovery and live new lives. But then I had this voice in my head that was like, don't you dare ask for help. We are not built that way. We will figure it out ourselves. Don't you dare. So I had like this wrestling match going on with like, I don't know, maybe my addiction and my spirit, but it was just like, it was intense. So I'm trying to get my courage up the whole meeting. And when the meeting ends, I'm finally feeling like, yeah, I can do this. I deserve a new life. I'm going to ask her for help. And I walk over to where she was, and she was gone. She left the meeting early. And I felt so defeated. And so with my head hanging, I walked to the bus to go home. And as I stepped onto the bus, that woman was sitting right there. She left the meeting early and was somehow on the exact same bus as me. Not in front of the meeting, because that's where I was waiting for the bus. I mean, it was miraculous. I ran up to her totally manic. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I think that you're an angel. You're sent to earth. You're here to help me. I can't believe it. I want to talk to you in there. But of course I couldn't talk to you in there because you're here and I can't believe it. I think you're supposed to help me. Will you help me? Please, 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 please. And she looked at me so calm, like she had been waiting there for me her whole life. And she said, yeah, we have a bed. Come by tomorrow. And that was it. I went there with just the clothes on my back because I didn't have anything. I mean, my most prized possession was a $200 vibrator. I figured if I could leave that behind, I could do anything. I literally thought about taking it. I was like, would they let me have this in there? I don't think so. So anyway, I left my vibrator behind and I started my spiritual journey. And I went into this long-term women's facility in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And I met the 25 other women that I would be on my healing journey with. And they were all at different points in their recovery. And like I said, I went in there empty-handed. And the girls just gave me socks and gave me underwear. And it was a really brutal experience. It was like an old school kind of therapeutic community where they sort of break you down and pulverize you into nothing and then help build you back up. And I'm so grateful for that experience. While I was in there, it just gave me a safe place. Nobody in there was like, oh my God, this is miraculous. This is the person that I've been waiting for to help me my whole life. It was more just I need 4 safe walls where I can actually just heal and feel my feelings. And when I finally started to feel my feelings, it was just confusion, embarrassment, disgust. I felt all the grief that I had been running from. It just all hit me all at once. It took me 4 months just to process that grief, literally every day, all day long. It was just all the grief that I had been avoiding for decades of my life was there to greet me. And luckily I was someplace safe so that I could actually just feel those feelings. And, there was all these weird rules inside that rehab. One of them was that you had to ask somebody who had been there longer to go into the refrigerator for you. This is a ridiculous rule. I know how to use a refrigerator. I'm a grown woman. But I realized in hindsight that it wasn't about the fridge. It was about asking for help. Every day, multiple times a day, I had to ask somebody to help me. And that was not something that I was used to. And I'm so grateful for that experience because now I have no problem asking for help. And I think that's one of like the greatest gifts of recovery. So, then I left treatment. I got a job in the recovery field helping other people because I didn't know what else to do with my life. And I started being of service in my 12-step fellowship, and my life just really started to transform. While I was in treatment, I was developing my spirituality as well. Like I didn't know anything about spirituality. I devoured every spiritual text that I could get my hands on. I became a student of A Course in Miracles, which is like one of my main courses of, how I walk through this life. One of the main pieces of spiritual information that I resonate with the most.
Death stories are mirrors. They show us our fears, our regrets, our love, our humanity. And if we are willing to listen closely enough, they teach us how to live differently. Thank you for joining me tonight, Soul Travelers. This is Janae of Living Truth, and this has been Death Stories, Living Truth.